Okay, so we've got a very simple React application here. It's got two routes hitting either this catalog or cart component. It's also outputting this header, which we can see up here. It's the My Store link and the link to cart. If we take a look at header, just mocked up some totals here that end up getting output in this button. And if we take a look at catalog, which is the page we're on right now, got a mocked up set of IDs which are acting as our products. I map those and give it a price that's equal to the index. And then we've got a little button down here that says add. It just calls this mocked up add item. So when I click on these guys, it just logs that out. If we jump over to our cart, you can see again, I've got some items mocked up, some totals mocked up. All of that feeds into the total at the bottom, but in the middle here we've got cart row, which takes in our item. If we jump to cart row, it takes in the item and it creates this set cart item, which again just logs out update and the item. And then we attach that to our cart buttons, remove, increase, and decrease each one on these buttons, and it just ends up calling that set cart item. So if I click on these guys, nothing actually happens, but we're logging that out. So we want to get this working, and we're going to use something called Jotai. Now Jotai is the successor to recoil. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file here called atoms. Since very much like recoil, Jotai uses the concept of atoms. So I'm going to pull in atom from Jotai. I'm going to create our first atom. So it's going to be items, and we're just going to pass into atom an empty array. So that is our first atom. It's what we call a primitive atom, which could be a Boolean or a number, a string. In our case, it's an empty array. I'm going to go ahead and set up our export for that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called a derived atom. And in particular, we're going to create a derived atom that happens to be read only. And that's going to be our cart totals. So I'm going to set that up the same way. It's an atom. But in this case, it's going to take in a function. Now this is, I'll call it the getter. And it can actually be followed by a setter function. And that would make this readable and writable. But since we only need to read it, we're going to be doing a read-only atom. So what we're going to return here is we're going to use our get argument that automatically comes into this function. We're going to say items, and then we're going to reduce on those to sum up the cost and quantity of our items. So we have our accumulator and our current. And we'll just return a new object with quantity of accumulator quantity plus current quantity and a cost of accumulator cost plus current cost times current quantity. And we'll start this guy off with quantity and cost of 0. Now we're going to go ahead and export this. And we're going to go ahead and try to use that. So we're going to jump over to our header. We're going to bring in Jotai. We're going to bring in use atom value. Now there are a few of these hooks. This one is use atom value. It's specifically meant for a read-only atom. And we're going to bring in our cart totals atom. Now here where we have our totals, we're going to go ahead and get rid of this. I'm going to say use atom value and pass in our atom. So we save that. Did get an error here. It does not provide an export cart totals. Let's look at that. Forgot the S. Okay. So we are now getting 0 and 0, which is precisely what we expected. One thing we can do is let's copy these guys and we'll drop them into our default values. So we're just starting this off with that, except I called it cost, not price. Cost. Should probably go look at that in our catalog really quick. I'm going to update this to cost as well. But now we can see that we've got a cart with 4 items and a cost of 6. And if I come over here and change this to 4, that went up to a total of 6 items. So we can see that that is actually working in our application. So what we're going to tackle next is this add item. So this will be a add item is going to be a writable atom. I should have named these better. So we're going to create a new atom here. It's going to be called add item. Again, it's going to be equal to an atom. Now in this one, since it's writable and we're not worried about reading it, we're going to say null for our first argument, and then we're going to have our setter function. So this is going to take the same get argument, but also a set argument, and then whatever we're updating. In our case, I'm just going to say new item. We're going to grab our current items. We're going to see if the new item exists, and then what we want to do is just update its quantity. So we got our item, and we say, does the i.id equal the new item.id? Then if it does, we know it already exists in the cart. So if it exists, we'll update that. Otherwise, we want to set our item. So we're using that set argument. We'll just spread current. Then we'll add in our new item with a quantity of 1. And then up here, we'll say set items. And then we just need to find the one in the current and increase its quantity. So we'll say current.map. There's a bunch of different ways we could do this. Item, if the item.id equals the new item.id, then we want to return something. Otherwise, we're just going to return the item. So in here, we're going to spread item and then just say the quantity is item quantity plus 1. Clean that up a bit. All right, so we're going to export that. Okay, now we're going to jump over to our catalog. We're kind of going to do this the long way, in my opinion, the first time. So I'm going to import Jotai. I'm going to import use set atom. So that's a hook that's specifically used for a writable atom only. I'm going to bring in our add item atom and come down here. I'm going to comment this out for now. I'm going to say const add equals use set atom, and then we're going to pass in our add item. And we'll just come down here, update this to add, save that, and let's see if, cool. So we can see it's updating these guys every time I click on it. So that's actually working great. I said we're kind of doing this the long way because every time you create an atom, you end up having to bring in a particular hook from Jotai in order to utilize it. And there's certainly a place for that. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I found I just like writing my own hooks. So rather than do it in the component, I'm actually going to bring it in here. I'm going to come down here and say const use add item. And that'll be a function that returns use set atom add item. And then I can just export that. And then if I go back to our catalog, I can say use add item. And I don't need to bring this in. And I can just say that is equal to use add item. So if we try that, let's reload this guy. You can see everything's working, and it's a little less boilerplate. Okay, so back to our atoms. So we're going to need a remove item. Again, it's going to be an atom. It's going to have a null for the getter, and then we're going to have our setter function. This is going to be get set and the item that we want to remove. And in this case, all we need to do is a set. So we'll say items, and then we'll say get items, and then we'll just filter out the one that we don't want. I'm going to set it up the same way. So I'm going to say use remove item is equal to a use set atom of remove item. And we'll export that as well. So from there, we're going to jump and take a look at our cart. Now, let's go ahead and get our items into our cart, our actual items rather than these mock items. So we're going to import items from our atoms and also our cart totals, which means we'll need use atom value. So let's set that up here, just like we did in our header. So now our items. Now, since we're going to be passing all of these into our cart row, and then each of those is going to have, the little buttons. Let's see if that actually, it's not going to work because I haven't put them in there yet. But if you've used Redux or Zustand or anything like that, you know that you're going to end up doing a lot of weird acrobatics to deal with immutable data, and you end up having to spread out all over these arrays. And so one really interesting concept that Jotai introduces, and I think this is where Jotai really starts to shine, is this idea of splitting an atom. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to import split atom from Jotai utils. And I'm going to come down here. I'm going to create a new hook. I'm going to call it use cart items. Now this is going to be a function that takes in a list of atoms and then returns use atom. So use atom, unlike use set atom, which allows us to only write a writable atom, and use atom value, which allows us to read a read-only value. Use atom is very much like use state. It's typically, you get a setter and a getter equal to use state and your thing. Use atom works the same way. Now let me bring in use atom. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say of these atoms, what I want it to do is I want it to split these atoms. And so this is really interesting. What's happening is I'm taking our list of items and I'm turning each one into its own atom, so its own little piece of state. And I can update those independent of the entire tree. So if you imagine that I had a decrease or increase item function here, well, I have to write it all out and do a bunch of this stuff. But here I can just say update that particular atom, which I just created from an array of items. The array itself was an atom, and I'm saying split it up into a whole bunch of little atoms and let me update them individually. And this makes things a lot easier to work with. So let's go ahead and give that a try. So rather than bringing in the items on their own, I'm also going to bring in use cart items. And then down here, I can say my cart items, which is going to be my getter. So again, just like use state, it's going to be equal to use cart items. And then I just pass in my items. So again, if we take a really quick look at it, use cart items takes in what I'm calling atoms. But it really is just an atom. The array itself is the atom. And then I'm saying split those atoms into multiple use atoms. All right, I keep saying atom and it's getting weird. Okay, so we've got our cart items. Cart items we're mapping. We're going through and we're passing that in there. You can do this a couple different ways, but you can't pull item ID right off of it. So I'm going to try this. See if that makes React happy over here. Yeah, I think that's all good. Okay, so we're passing in our item, which is now an atom. So we want to keep that in mind. So we're going to go to our cart row, and here we're going to bring in use atom. And rather than this cart item equaling the item that we brought in, since we know that's an atom, we're going to say cart item is the getter, and then we have set cart item as the setter. That's going to be equal to use atom, and our atom is our item. So we don't need that any longer. So now we've got our read and our update for this guy. All of these look fine. So let's go look at our cart buttons. And now we need to, so we've got our cart item and we've got our set cart item, and we just need to update all of these to function correctly. So one thing we can do here, since we already created our remove item earlier, we can import use remove item from our atoms. And this will just be equal to use remove item. Okay, so that's done. I think the only thing we need to update there, because we do need to pass in the item we want to remove. So here we'll just say cart item. And this doesn't actually need to return that. It's just assigned to it. So now on our decrease, we have our set cart item. So this again is going to work. I'm going to break this out a little bit. It's going to work just like use state. So what we can consider is if set cart item is just like use state, then cart item is our previous state. So we're going to take that in, and we're just going to return our cart item with a quantity of cart item dot quantity plus 1. So we're done there. Now decrease is a little more interesting because we have to if our current quantity is 0 or 1, we want to remove it from the cart. So we'll say if cart item dot quantity equals 1, we'll just return remove item and pass in our cart item. Otherwise, we're going to update it in the array. There's our previous state, cart item, then a quantity of cart item dot quantity minus 1. Cool. So let's check this out. We're going to jump over here. We're going to add some items, a bunch of pears and apples, and we're going to remove that. That works. We're going to reduce this until it goes away. I think we've still got some mock data in here. Yeah, let's get rid of this. And we'll just run through that one more time. Bunch of apples, bunch of oranges, bunch of tomatoes. Oh, we're getting out a number on the total on the line item. You know what? I updated all that to be cost instead of price. Okay, sorry about that. One more time. Apples, oranges, tomatoes. See our cart, so we'll increase this. We can see everything's going up. We'll decrease that. It's working. We'll remove that guy. We'll take this down to 2, 1, 0. All of that's working great. So in a nutshell, that is Jotai. There's some really interesting things here. Everything's built off of atoms. I did want to show one more really interesting thing, and that is, we're just going to try this out. So this is atom with storage from Jotai utils. This is pretty dope because watch, I'm going to say instead of just an atom, this is an atom with storage. I'm going to save that, and I totally broke something. This needs a name. Items. There we go. Save that. And now check this out. So when I refresh, everything's gone because all of this is in memory. But now, as I'm adding items, and I go to my cart and I reload, it's all being stored in local storage. So if I come over here to application and check out our local storage, we can see there's our items right there. So I've got 3 apples. And if I add that, it is updating in local storage. And that's how easy it is to start storing things. There's further configuration you can do here to update things in session or local storage. So there you go. That is a quick look at Jotai. I think it's really, really cool. It's got some very interesting new ideas that I haven't seen elsewhere.